Picture this. You're a hospitality boss, running pubs, employing people, serving your community, and you get invited to dinner with the future Chancellor of the Exchequer and Deputy Prime Minister. They are not in power yet, but everyone knows they are about to be. They sit across from you, look you dead in the eye, and promise you the world. They tell you they love your industry. They understand your struggles. They are going to be different. Fast forward 3 years, and you're watching those same politicians implement policies that are absolutely decimating your sector. Welcome to the masterclass in political betrayal starring Rachel Reeves, brought to you by a hospitality campaigner who's had enough of the lies, the spin, and the absolute nonsense coming out of Westminster. Quick favor. If you're absolutely fed up with politicians saying one thing and doing another, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Over 94% of you haven't subscribed yet. It's completely free, takes 2 seconds, and it helps us keep exposing the truth. Cheers if you've done it. Right, let's get into this absolute car crash. Adam Brooks is not your typical political commentator. He's a publican, a campaigner, a writer, and someone who spent years on the front lines of Britain's hospitality industry. And when he appeared on the Daily Expresso podcast recently, he didn't hold back. In fact, his opening line was so direct, so blunt, so refreshingly honest that it probably made every spin doctor in Westminster choke on their morning coffee. Reeves is a liar. 3 words. No qualification. No hedging. Just a straightforward accusation from someone who's watched the promises turn to dust right before his eyes. Now, before we go any further, let's set the scene properly because context is everything here. About 3 years ago, when the Conservatives were imploding faster than a Dodgers souffle and everyone with half a brain could see Labour was heading for power, Adam Brooks found himself sitting at a dinner table with Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner. This wasn't some random encounter. This was a deliberate meeting. Brooks knew they were going to come into power. The Conservatives were done, he said, and he wasn't wrong about that, was he? So here's this hospitality boss, representing an industry that employs millions of people and forms the backbone of communities across Britain, getting the full charm offensive from Labour's top brass. And what a charm offensive it was. According to Brooks, they sat across the table from him and his colleagues, promising the world. We love hospitality, they said. Rachel Reeves, the woman who will become Chancellor of the Exchequer, apparently told him that pubs were the heartbeat of community and that Labour would be different. Different from Conservatives who neglected the sector. Different from the endless red tape and rising costs. Just different. Better. The sort of thing you want to hear when you're running businesses that are already operating on razor-thin margins and wondering how you're going to survive the next crisis. But here's where the story goes from disappointing to absolutely infuriating. Brooks didn't mince his word when describing what's happened since Labour took power. They've been 10 times worse. 10 times. Not a bit worse. Not marginally more challenging. 10 times worse. That's not just a broken promise. That's a complete inversion of everything they said they'd do. It's one thing to get into government and realize that implementing policy is harder than campaigning. It's quite another to take the exact opposite approach to what you promised the people who trusted you enough to share their concerns over dinner. And this is where it gets really interesting because Brooks isn't just complaining. He's asking the fundamental question that every voter should be asking right now. How can I believe a thing any politician really says? It's a question that cuts to the heart of our entire democratic system. When the people who promise to support you end up implementing policies that harm you, when the dinner table commitments evaporate the moment they get power, when the charm offensive turns into a demolition job, why should anyone believe anything they say? It's not cynicism, it's pattern recognition. It's learning from experience. It's realizing that the gap between what politicians promise and what they deliver has become a chasm so wide you could park the national debt in it. So what's a disillusioned hospitality boss to do? Well, Brooks has made his position crystal clear. He's backing Reform UK. Now, before anyone starts shouting about this being a political endorsement piece, stay with me because what Brooks says about reform is actually more revealing about the state of British politics than it is about any particular party. At the moment, I am with Reform, he said, just because I want change. Not because he thinks they are perfect. Not because he believes they have all the answers. But because he wants something, anything, different from what we've got now. He believes in their immigration policies. He believes in their business policies about cutting taxes. He thinks we need to be radical because a uniparty, as he calls it, meaning the established political class that seems to agree on far more than they admit, isn't going to deliver the change Britain needs. But here's where Brooks shows a kind of political awareness that's sadly lacking in most of Westminster. He immediately follows up with a crucial caveat. But would reform be my friends in government? No government's your friend. People need to remember that. This is a sort of clear-eyed realism that should be taught in schools. Governments aren't your mates. They are not there to be your friends. They are there to represent you, protect you, serve you. And somewhere along the line, Brooks argues that fundamental relationship has been completely inverted. Governments are now controlling us and going against us, he said. Something's fundamentally wrong in this country with politics. And when he was asked whether he considered going into politics himself, his answer was absolutely fascinating. No. Why? Because I think it's rotten. He went on to explain that he's a type of person who, if a party told him he had to support something he disagreed with, would tell them exactly where to go. I wouldn't last 5 minutes in politics, he admitted. Now, on one level, that's depressing because it means people with integrity and real-world experience feel they can't operate within the political system. But on another level, it's a damning indictment of how that system works. The people who'd make good politicians won't do it because the system is rotten, and the system stays rotten because it's full of people who are willing to compromise their principles to stay in it. Let's talk about what's actually happened to hospitality under Labour, because the details matter here. Rachel Reeves announced in her budget that she would introduce permanently lower business rates for more than 750,000 retail, hospitality, and leisure properties. Sounds good, doesn't it? She even said these would be the lowest rates since 1991. That's a hell of a selling point. Lower rates, supporting small businesses, helping the high street. All the right buzzwords. But as with everything in politics, you need to read the fine print. And the fine print is where things get messy. These lower rates are being paid for through higher rates on properties worth more than £500,000, including the warehouses used by what Reeves called online giants. Now, in theory, this sounds like progressive taxation. Tax the big online retailers who've been avoiding proper business rates by operating from massive warehouses, and use that money to help the small businesses on the high street. Robin Hood economics. Take from the rich, give to the poor. Except economics doesn't work like that, and anyone with even a basic understanding of how businesses operate knows that these costs don't just disappear into thin air. When you increase costs for large businesses, they have several options. They can absorb the costs and take lower profits, which shareholders absolutely hate. They can pass the costs on to consumers through higher prices, which makes everyone poorer. They can cut costs elsewhere, which usually means redundancies. Or they can relocate to somewhere with a more favorable tax environment, which means Britain loses jobs and investment. None of these options are good for the economy, and all of them have knock-on effect that ripple through the system. But more importantly, this completely misses the point of what hospitality businesses are actually facing. The sector has been absolutely hammered over the last few years. First, there was a pandemic, which shut down pubs, restaurants, and venues for months on end. Then there was a cost of living crisis, which meant people had less disposable income to spend on going out. Then there were energy bills that went through the roof, supply chain issues that made everything more expensive, and staff shortages because Brexit and the pandemic had combined to create a perfect storm in the labour market. And through all of this, hospitality businesses were barely hanging on, operating on margins so thin you could see through them, hoping that things would get better. And what did they get when Labour came to power? National insurance contribution increases that make it more expensive to employ people. Higher minimum wage costs, which again make employment more expensive. More regulatory burden. And a business rate system that, despite the promises of lower rates for some properties, still doesn't address the fundamental unfairness of taxing physical premises far more heavily than online operations. It's like watching someone drowning and throwing them an anchor while claiming it's a life preserver. This is why Adam Brooks is so angry. This is why he used the word liar without hesitation. Because he sat at that dinner table 3 years ago and listened to Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner tell him they understood. They got it. They were going to be different. They were going to support hospitality. Pubs were the heartbeat of the community. All those lovely, warm, fuzzy phrases that make you think someone actually cares about the real-world impact of their policies. And then they got into power and implemented an agenda that's made things worse. Not better, not even the same. Worse. 10 times worse, in Brooks's estimation. The really tragic thing about all of this is that it didn't have to be this way. There are genuine, workable policies that could support hospitality without bankrupting the Treasury. You could have a proper reform of business rates that recognizes the digital economy isn't just a temporary phenomenon, but a fundamental shift in how commerce works. You could reduce the regulatory burden that makes it so expensive and time-consuming to operate a pub or restaurant. You could have a sensible immigration policy that allows businesses to fill vacancies while also training British workers. You could cut employers' national insurance instead of increasing it. There are dozens of things you could do if your actual priority was supporting the sector, but that's not what's happened. Instead, we've got a government that says all the right things in opposition, makes all the right promises when they are trying to win support, and then does something completely different when they're in power. It's not incompetence. It's not misunderstanding.